Good evening, and thank you so much for joining us on The Last Word. My name is Sophia Wanuna. Tonight, we focus on matters education. Earlier in the day, stakeholders in the education sector were gathered at the Kenyatta International Convention Center to review the curriculum. The 844 system of education has been with us here in Kenya for 3 decades now. And the question is it time to move on to a different system? Is that system broke? Is it time to be able to get to a system that will move this country forward? I'll be introducing my guests to you shortly. But first, let's have a look at a report that was prepared by Michelle Ngele, who attended that particular meeting. This is what was some of the developments from that meeting, and then we'll come back and discuss with my guests this evening. The National Conference for Curriculum Reforms saw 500 education stakeholders converge in Nairobi to review a proposal in which the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development is seeking to introduce a new system to replace the current 844 system. The 844 system, introduced in 1985, has been touted as too expensive and burdensome for students. There have also been concerns that learners are more focused on passing exams than gaining knowledge. As a result, exams, especially during last year's KCSE and KCPE examinations, were marred by massive irregularities, leading to the cancellation of results for 5,000 KCSE candidates.
The 844 system is not the problem. The problem is the content. There are many systems which are 44 or 448 or, in the case of the UK, 663, but it's not the structure.
The new education system will encourage students to specialize in areas they are good at early enough and then take on career paths related to that at higher education level. Examinations will only seek to address gaps in the teaching and learning process and not to pigeonhole learners into achievers or failures.
The East African community countries signed a protocol to harmonize our curriculum across the region, to go competency-based curriculum. So we are doing this to allow for free movement of students, free movement of labor.
The proposed 2663 system includes 2 years of preschool, 6 years of primary school, 3 years of junior secondary, another 3 years in senior secondary, and 3 years at the university. Speaking during the conference, Deputy President William Ruto expressed confidence that the new system would curb cases of exam cheating.
This conversation is very important because it's about our present, it's about our children, it's about our future.
His statement was echoed by Education Cabinet Secretary Fred Matiang'i, who stated that the draft design of the new curriculum will be ready in the next 2 months.
To clarify to everyone that we are actually engaged in a curriculum reform, not review.
If adopted, 2018 may mark the last time the KCPE examinations are written in Kenya, with the last KCSE cohort scheduled to sit the exam in 2021. Michelle Ngele, KTN News. All right, so we've heard from that report, those are some of the sentiments that came from the conference at the KICC. In 2 months' time, we'll get a clearer way forward. Joining me in studio tonight is the man that's at the center of the development of that new curriculum, the director of the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development. That's Julius Juan. Thank you so much for joining us. Also with us tonight is Jendros Kibara, doctor, who is an educationist, currently also a senior lecturer at the Africa Nazarene University. We thank you for making time for the last word tonight. Let me begin with you, Dr. Juan, and let's talk about, we have gotten here 30 years on with the 844 system. What has been wrong with it so far?
Thank you, first of all, for having me to discuss matters curriculum. Maybe I could start by saying that it's not so much what has been wrong with it so far. It's so much of the times that have changed. New realities have come into existence, and the society is ever changing. So we need to do things differently as a country, and that calls for a curriculum that can respond to those needs. There are several factors that we've taken into consideration. First is that UNESCO, which sets the IB UNESCO that sets the standards for a curriculum, requires that we review our curriculum after every 5 years.
So why has this taken 30?
Well, the review should be after every 5 years. Reform, you have a flexibility as a country. What we are undertaking now is a reform. The last reform was 1985, when we introduced it for 4. But the last review was 2003. So even for review, we have delayed.
Okay.
So we need to get it moving.
Get it moving. All right. Let me bring in Dr. Kibara and your thoughts just watching this curriculum being in place for that period of time. Yes, there have been reviews, but as far as reforms, this is when the country is considering that. What do you see as currently ailing the system?
Thank you, Sophie, for the invitation. I would like to say that the 844 system, it's not the problem we have in our country. The problem actually is implementation. You find that the stakeholders, for example, the teachers, they were not very well prepared for the implementation of the 844 system. And that is why, at this particular time, we need to ensure that we bring on board all the stakeholders in education so that we do not find ourselves in the same problems.
So are you saying there's no problem with 844 in itself as a system?
The 844 as a system is a very good system, but it has its own shortcomings, which have been brought about by the events that have taken place over time. I'll give an example of the examination-oriented nature of the system. Initially, the 844 system was actually a very good system. You find that young children, both in primary and secondary schools, used to learn arts and crafts, used to learn music, and all those courses that can enable them to be self-employed, to be reliable, without only relying on being employed. But along the way, we find that all that was thrown out of the window and replaced with examinations. That's why you find that we are talking about examination malpractice. Students are cheating because they have been trained to learn that you must pass without realizing that every child has a potential.
All right, so it's a lot of cramming that we've seen many people criticize the K844 system for, as opposed to critical thinking, and that's the level we want to get to. But before we move on, talk to us about what your organization does, your institution, the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development.
Oh, thank you.
Briefly, yes.
Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development is former KIE, Kenya Institute of Education. It has a new act that came into existence in 2012. Our core mandate is to develop curriculum and curriculum support materials for all levels of education below the university. We also vet and approve any foreign curriculum that is being offered in this country. We also vet and approve any curriculum support materials that is being taken to our schools, and also advise the government on any matters that relate to the curriculum. Broadly, that is our mandate. We have several other small, factors that feed into those key issues.
All right. So today the function, what is that? Because there are those who think we now have a new curriculum. Please clarify that was the beginning of a journey.
It was part of a journey that started a while ago. But we felt that it has reached a stage where probably this journey needs to be made public to Kenyans.
Right.
Because we've had a lot of debate in the press. We've had a lot of debate on the education system. And I think this reached a what I would consider fever height when we had issues around the examinations. And everybody was talking about the curriculum, education system. So we thought it was a high time that now we came public and informed Kenyans on what we are doing, where we have come from, and the direction that we are going, so that they appreciate that something is happening in relation to the education structure, or education system for that matter. Yeah.
Dr. Kibara, you attended the talks today, the event at KICC. What did you pick out from the various speakers trying to break down where the country has come from, and more importantly, where our education system needs to go?
Actually, today's talks revolved around the need to have a curriculum that is focusing on the learner rather than focusing solely on the examinations, to ensure that every learner is assisted to realize their full potential, because every learner has actually got a talent. I may not be an A material, but I have a talent that I can be assisted to cultivate. I have a potential that I can be assisted to realize. And that is what most of the talks actually revolved around. And also preparing our learners towards achievement of Vision 2030, whereby we are hoping that you stop relying so much on employment, and we will have entrepreneurs, for example. We will have businessmen and women who can actually move this economy. We can have athletes, we can have artists, we can have musicians who can move this economy rather than only relying on books.
Right.
Not everyone can be a doctor. Not everyone can be a scientist.
And we need to change that thinking that success equals doctor, success equals
exactly
pilot or whatever. I mean, those are great careers, and kudos to the people who manage to get into them. But still, there needs to be a little bit of breaking that down. But Doctor, talk to us about what is the new proposal. What is it we want to get Kenyans to into the next system?
I think the first, probably just relate to what my colleague has discussed. The first thing that we need to do that probably was not done right when we were starting the 844 is to make sure that we have a philosophy that drives the reform that we want to introduce.
Right.
We must have a vision that drives the reform that we want to introduce. And if our vision, like she's mentioned, is nurturing every learner's talent, then we tell Kenyans to sit back and reflect what exactly does that mean. If one of the pillars of our curriculum reform is embedded in an attempt to introduce 21st century skills, critical thinking, innovation, people relations, etc., what does that mean? And that brings me to your question. When you talk of critical thinking, how do you give a learner a chance to think critically? That means at a very low age, for example, from ECD, you must create an environment where that learner is guided to discover for himself or herself. Once you do that, then you're starting to develop somebody who thinks critically, because you give them a situation that makes them to think, to come to get a solution to what they see in front of them. Now, what we have now is a child who goes to school by 6, if they're late.
Yeah, sits in traffic for a while.
Huge bag. They're worried because they didn't finish their homework. They get there and the teacher starts teaching. Pumping. By the time you're coming home, you're in your bus, you get home late, you have homework.
Yes.
The parent is struggling to help you do your homework, going to bed at midnight. So this kind of child only knows that things are supposed to be given, you take it in, then you give it back. So these are the kind of issues that we are trying to address in the curriculum reform. 2 is that we are going into what we call competence-based curriculum. What you have heard is called content objectives-based curriculum. When you go competence-based curriculum, you are focusing on competencies and skills that every learner can put on the table. And it goes back to that vision that we all have a potential. That means I may not be very good in biology, but as she said earlier, I can do my music.
All right.
And so that is what I enjoy.
So that is the vision. I hope I've not cut you short. You had one
I was
more
going
point?
to the third one.
Yes.
The third key issue that also fits within that thinking is the flexibility that comes with the new curriculum. And that flexibility is embedded within the pathways. At some stage, you should be able to give learners different pathways so that that talent of yours has a chance to be nurtured at some stage and developed further. If you want to do music...
The earlier remarks that were made by the Deputy President expressing confidence that Kenya indeed will be able to turn that page and get to a better place in as far as raising people that are able to build the country, not only in what has traditionally been seen as successful areas of careers, but across the board. And before we continue that discussion this evening, I just want to bring us into one of the studies that was conducted by United Nations on education standards around the world and some of the best ranked systems. And so East Asian nations continue to outperform others. South Korea here tops their rankings, followed by Japan. And more importantly, when you look at the top 5, one of the things they say about each of them is the investment, and as far as money is concerned, that there's a lot of money that's going into this. So, for example, they say for the 2 countries, that South Korea, it could be argued it is one of the most dedicated countries in the world. Children often attend school 7 days a week and do homework from a very young age. It's a mixed bag. So you have a country like that that has students going to school 7 days a week, homework from a very young age, to countries like Finland, where school starts at 7 years and there's no homework for young children. Exams don't start up until the age of 13. So and you have looked at education systems around the world. When you hear this kind of statistics, what does it say it takes to get it right for an education system, for a curriculum?
Wow, several factors.
Yeah.
One is investment. But even before you come to the investment, what is the philosophy that informs your education system?
Yes.
I had the privilege of visiting South Korea to just look at the education system, how they handle it, and incidentally, they're in competency-based curriculum. The only thing that South Korea has done is that they have invested very heavily in their teachers. In South Korea, teachers maybe is not even one of the most, probably teaching is the most respected profession in South Korea. And
you're right, they say it's held in high regards and teachers are treated with great respect, equal to how they revere doctors or lawyers in the West.
Yes.
So spot on that.
Now, in South Korea, interesting thing that I found out when I was there is that you would find people waiting for 3 years to get admission to the university to become a teacher because the demand is so high. Another thing is that they've invested in modern technology. And when you hear that children go to school for 7 days in a week, don't think that they go and spend the whole day being given content. They go to school, but when you go to a class environment, I visited a few classes, you find a lot of children doing work on their own. They enjoy it. It's like play. In that play, they also perform activities.
Yeah, it becomes fun. They're learning, fun. Yeah.
Now, Finland has what we call, what they call now phenomena-based curriculum.
Yes.
It's not necessarily that much different from competence-based curriculum. The only thing that Finland is now trying to do, and by the way, they have a very small number, so the ratio of teacher to children is really low. But what they are trying to do is to let a child learn from their natural environment. That now if you are in this environment, what exactly exists around here? And how does a child use that environment to help them learn? So, when they call it phenomena, but still, they expect you to demonstrate what you've learned. Incidentally, before South Korea, Finland, has been ranked as one of the best.
And Japan as well.
Yes.
So when you hear this, and there isn't any African country in the top 20, the US is at 14 and others, what does that say about Africa and, as we continue to develop our education systems?
That calls for us to up our game as the African countries, and more so as a nation. We need to bring on board into our curriculum aspects that can actually transform the whole person, not only to make this person an academician, a medical doctor, or a teacher for that matter, but to transform the whole person and make this person realize that there is more to education rather than to the academics. For example, we've seen people who are very learned in this country doing things that are not acceptable. For example, with the slightest provocation, you start burning your neighbor. You start killing your neighbor in the name of maybe religion, tribal aspects. That is why, as we transform our curriculum, we need to bring other aspects into the curriculum. Because as we compare ourselves with other countries, we also need to look at our own situation. Remember, our situations, our circumstances are different. We can borrow the best, but we need to ensure that we borrow only that which fits within our own situation. We need a curriculum that will train Kenyans to be responsible citizens. Things, taxation, for example, such that someone will know that there is need to pay taxes.
Right.
And when someone gets money that is paid as tax, and it comes to bribe me to vote for them, I'll say a big no. How will I say a big no? Not by stoning their cars or doing other things, but by not voting for them. Right. Because I know my rights.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I want to ask you this as you also add on to what you were saying about the UK ranked 6th, but one of the things that's interesting with their system is that they have devolved it so that with the devolution of education in UK, the individual governments are administrating the matters relating education on their own. In Kenya, we have healthcare devolved. Do you think from where you sit, it's a matter that would help ease up the pressure to have the decentralization of the management?
It may not necessarily follow because there are those that have devolved systems of education and those that don't, still have a centralized system. UK is devolved, but policies and basic structures of what informs education are still centralized.
Okay.
The kind of devolution that is, if you take UK, well, you know what UK is, because that is England, that is Wales, that is Scotland, and Northern Ireland. So to that extent, you'll find that the devolved way of handling education in the UK takes care of the cultural interests and differences within the different countries. Like when you go to Wales, you'll find that they won't have a language, is it Flemish? But they have a language that is their own, that is so distinct to them. When you go to Scotland, you find that there are specific cultures that are so distinct to them. So that as much as they have overall structures and overall policies that guide education, a lot of what they engage in are devolved to those specific countries. And that is why that works for them. Incidentally, you'll find that when you look at the Scottish curriculum, again, it is one of the best in the world. And it's because they have their unique Scottish way of doing things and promoting their culture as Scottish, but again within the larger UK. But you saw that recently they also wanted to delink from the larger UK, although it didn't go through.
Right.
So devolution can work. For example, again in Canada. In Canada, again, education is devolved to various provinces. I mean, I didn't need to say this, but at some stage I was involved in a study in the UK, and we were looking at the various regions, and we were focusing on skills that they will need in the next 10 to 20 years, so that they're able to compete with the Asian tigers and other Western countries. I also recently had the privilege of visiting Canada, the province of Alberta, and we engaged with their curriculum developers. It is devolved, but the general policies are retained at higher level. They develop local curriculum based on guidelines that come from the higher level. So it works very well for them, but when you move, for example, from Alberta to, let's say, Quebec or British Columbia, you will see that there are certain things that are common that run across. For example, the development of pathways is so entrenched throughout the country.
Right.
And that is what drives the economy. You don't have to go to the university. Actually, the most paying jobs in Kenya and Canada are for the technical skills.
Yeah.
The mechanics, you know, all these hands-on, what they call the blue-collar jobs.
Do we also need to develop more polytechnics type of middle level institutions that these young people can know that, yeah, this is a place I can go. This is, it works out. It's not necessarily a place to look down on or consider not prestigious. There are several myths to be able to debunk, don't you think, going forward?
Yes, I agree that we need to have quite a number of technical training institutes, vocational training institutes, where young people can be trained on skills, vocational skills particularly, that can enable them have skills, acquire skills that they can use on day-to-day lives, actually to earn a living for themselves and also to move this economy. For example, today, if you want a good plumber, you will have to really look around because they're not there. We have also turned most of our polytechnics into institutions of higher learning, which I think it's really not very right. And therefore, there's need to develop more vocational training institutes to empower young people with the skills that are going to help them. Right. Hands-on skills, actually, that are going to assist them.
Yes.
For example, when you look around, there are very many unemployed young people. And if these people are equipped with the skills that can enable them, perform various activities, tailoring, for example, dressmaking, hairdressing, we will have actually this economy move to very high levels.
Yeah, so for them to be developed, but also for young people to see them as the place to go. Because now you think University of Nairobi, that's the place to go. What will get these young people to say, this is where I want to go? Because even from there, I will not be looked down upon in society.
Now, before I come to that, let me just mention that I think it's last week when you noticed that the government of Israel was giving our students scholarships to go and learn irrigation, to come and work in the Tanaga Land Irrigation Scheme. Honestly, do we need people to travel to Israel to learn irrigation?
No.
Just again, the other week, you saw students being given scholarship to go to China to come and work and build our railways. Really? Do we need to do that? Now, that tells you how much our education, probably our way of doing things, has really made us stagnate. But let me go back to what she was saying, which I fully support. As we talk now, I hope you are aware that the government is building a TTI at least in every constituency in this country. Last financial year, funds were allocated for 60. This financial year, funds have been allocated for 70. And this will continue until every constituency has a new TTI. That is notwithstanding those ones that existed before. Now, what we need to do is what we want to do in this education reform is empowering parents and the young people to start appreciating that these pathways are just way of earning a living like any other.
Yes.
Giving them an opportunity to appreciate that really, and giving them an opportunity to also identify that is what they want to do, and that is what makes them happy, and that is what. I'll give you an example. If I just leave Tibet.
Briefly, we have 2 minutes to wind up.
Yes, if I just leave Tibet briefly. I mean, look at our comedians. I mean, they were not trained anywhere.
And they're doing amazing stuff. Eric Omondi was just doing a tour in Australia.
Don't we admire them?
Yes.
Our singers, don't we admire them?
Sure.
I don't want to talk about the Naipe sisters who went into music out of family interest. Don't we admire them? How many young people do you think would want to go into those different pathways from early stages?
So we need to just have more
attitude. That will help us change attitude for people to appreciate that really this is the way to go.
All right. Yeah. So give us your final words, Doctor, in as far as we have this conversation now happening in the country, and we hope to be able to change things so that we can have more manpower, or if you like, woman power, to be politically correct, that is pushing and fueling this country forward.
I would like to say that this is not only a government issue. It's not only for the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development. It is for all of us Kenyans to actually be actively involved.
Right.
We all play our roles in our own small ways or our own big ways. Let us embrace this. Let us support the government. If we are parents, let us support in our own situations as parents. If we are teachers, let us support in implementing this particular curriculum, in giving our views and our opinions.
All right.
And that way, we are going to embrace the system. And also let's consider the aspect of continuous improvement. That is what has made Japan #2 in the world.
Yes.
Because their curriculum is based on Kaizen, you know, the philosophy of continuous improvement. Let us not wait for the system to go down 10 years before we start saying, no, there are shortfalls here. Let us continuously improve to make it better.
Right.
So that we can move forward and we can move this country forward.
Well said. Thank you so much. Your final words.
I think my final word is really to tell Kenyans that as KICD, our doors are open. Let Kenyans come up and give us their views. Let them come up and contribute. Let us, because every development, every new thing has challenges. So let's not sit there and start saying, this is bad, this is bad. Let's come and contribute and make the process work.
By the way, have they been giving in their views? You were collecting?
Oh, we did. We put it in the papers. It was on social media.
Right.
And we went through the country, all until Mandera, until Turkana. We have collected massive information, but our doors are not closed. Our doors are open.
Yeah.
Let Kenyans come forward and help us make it what it should be for this country.
All right.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you both so much for joining us tonight. This, my extreme right, Generous Kibara, who's an educationist, also with us, Julius Juan Doctor, who's the director at the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development. Thank you so much for making time for that very important conversation. Yeah. Pleasure to have you here as well. As we wrap up tonight, the function of education is to teach one to think intensively and to think critically. Intelligence plus character, that is the goal of true education. Those are the words of Martin Luther King Jr. And that is where we end, with that being our last word. Thank you for watching. Have a good night. I'm Sophia Wanuna.